biggest open cast coal mine in the UK, will close at the end of November. Planning permission for mining at Force of Ran in Merthyr Tydfil ran out in September last year, and an appeal for more time was refused by the local council, and an enforcement notice was issued a couple of months ago. Now, the site employs around about 180 staff, and it supplies the steelworks in Port Talbot, as well as the UK's heritage steam railways. Most of the employees look set to be made redundant. So how well is Wales poised for what comes next in energy production? Robert Gross is Professor of Energy Policy at Imperial College London, Director of the UK Energy Research Centre. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me on.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure to have you. I mean, this is a moment, isn't it? You know, when you look at... There was a time in Wales where roughly half the population depended on coal for their living in one way or another. For it finally to end, it is quite a moment.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I know that coal production has a particular sort of resonance in Welsh history, as it does in other former coal mining parts of the UK. But we have been on a progressive journey in our energy supplies away from a very heavy reliance on coal for more than 3 decades. If you look back to 1990, 80% of our electricity came from coal, 20% from nuclear, and we're now down to coal providing a handful of percent, despite those high gas prices that Vicky was talking about just now, and despite keeping some of those older coal-fired power stations going a little bit longer. This has been a long journey away from our huge reliance as an island made of coal.
It is interesting, though, isn't it, that we seem to have transitioned from coal via gas to renewables. It hasn't been a simple process.
No, not at all. And if you look back to the 1990s, when we had what was called the dash for gas, that was really driven by what were then recently privatized electricity companies realizing that they could make electricity more cheaply by building new gas-fired power stations than they could by relying on the existing and recently privatized coal and nuclear power stations. Bit different with renewables, because renewables was much more driven by policy. It was much more deliberate. You know, we had hardly any renewables in our mix at the beginning of the century, and they're now up to providing us with something like 30 or more % of our electricity. So remarkable success, actually, for increasing the greenness of our energy. But you're right, it's a complicated story.
Is there an element of virtue signalling, though? You know, I'm thinking of the Tata Steelworks in Port Talbot. They'll continue using coal. Those steam railways will continue using coal. The only difference is it will be imported coal. So in a sense, we're just sort of outsourcing our pollution, aren't we?
I think that's a legitimate argument. I'm not close to the local conversation around. I mean, it's an open cast mine. It's only been running for 20 years itself. It's not as if it's been deeply embedded in history, and it's been controversial ever since it opened. So I think, you know, I understand the reasons that it's closed. The steelworks in Port Talbot will be part of a bigger push to decarbonise industry. There's a very important industrial decarbonisation cluster around South Wales. I'm afraid I don't know where the historic steam trains will be able to get coal from in the future. I love historic steam trains. If there's any coal still burnt in the future, in the decarbonised future of Great Britain, I would hope it's still being burnt in historic steam trains.
Yeah, I guess most people would agree with that. In terms of where we're heading towards net zero, where are we? Because, you know, gas doesn't get us there, does it?
Gas doesn't get us there. No, not at all. Gas in electricity generation gets us kind of, halfway there in terms of the reduction in emissions relative to coal. What we need to do in electricity generation in order to get all of the way to net zero is to push for more and more renewables. There will be a role for nuclear, but most of the scenarios suggest that the heavy lifting now will be done with renewables, basically because they've gotten an awful lot cheaper. But we have to remember that we still burn fossil fuels directly in our homes, in our gas boilers mainly, and in most of our vehicles in the form of petrol and diesel. So a net zero world is largely an electric world where we use electricity a lot more and we get that electricity from cleaner sources. And moving into that world is obviously an historic challenge. It could be an opportunity as well, and I would hope that we can realise that opportunity.
And those opportunities, I mean, I keep hearing these phrases, like a Green New Deal, a green future, that this is where the economic opportunities lie. What do we have to do to take advantage of those opportunities? Because, we here in Wales, if you drive around in Wales, you see an awful lot of wind farms which create a few jobs when they're being built, but not much after that. What do we need to do to use net zero as an opportunity as well as a target?
Yeah, and that's become a more and more interesting question. I was listening with great interest to your previous item and the mention of the United States. So it's very obvious that what Joe Biden believes is that to get the benefits of this green transition or this green revolution is to go back to really quite old-fashioned active industrial policy and say through his Inflation Reduction Act, we're going to give you a very generous tax incentive if you come here and you don't just install solar panels that were made in China, but you build a manufacturing plant here. And he's deliberately providing those opportunities in what some people refer to as the Rust Belt of the US. So the kind of deindustrialized areas that have suffered from globalization. Now, we're not trying. We do a bit of that. We sprinkle a little bit of an opportunity. Here we want to build some offshore wind off the east coast of England, for example, and we'll provide some opportunities there. But you're right. I don't think that we collectively as the UK or in Wales have figured out quite what we think we should do. And obviously it's become quite contested within the Conservative Party, with people arguing we should back off on net zero and that kind of thing. Until we get beyond that and figure out what we actually need to do to land those jobs here, I think we're a bit stuck, and that is a problem.
Robert Gross, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Well,